Welcome to the Successful Life Podcast. I am your host, Corey Barrier, and I am here with Sam Hurd. He's a wedding photographer from Washington, D.C., a wedding and portrait photographer from Washington, D.C. in the Baltimore area. I'm pretty sure, though, I'm pretty sure he doesn't just shoot weddings in in
That's
Baltimore
true.
and D.C. In fact, if I had to guess, based on what I know about him, he travels a lot. So we're going to hear about his story, and I think this is going to be super, super entertaining. And like this dude is pretty well known, so I'm pretty excited to have him on. So Sam, thank you so much for coming on. Let's take off. I want to hear all about you.
Thanks, Corey. Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. I'm excited to talk a bit. I have shoots every day for the next 3 days, so it's nice to do something non-photo related for a little while. I'm also in the when I'm not shooting, in just the editing cave right now. This time of year is pretty intense for weddings, and I think my last wedding. I have two more for the year. I have one this Saturday, and then I'm going to basically have 4 weeks off, and I have one like 3 days after Christmas, and I'll be done for the year. So I cannot wait for that moment.
Oh, I
So,
bet.
yeah.
Just out of curiosity, how long does it take you when you edit a wedding? How many pictures would you say that you take on an average way? I know it differs from what.
I hit a pretty consistent average. It's shocking. So I photograph, most weddings are 8 hours long, and that yields about 4,500 to 5,000 images from the whole day. I cull that down to about 800 to 1,000, and then the final edited is usually right around 800. That I send to the client in their full gallery. That turnaround time takes 6 to 8 weeks. But that's mostly just me. It doesn't take 6 to 8 weeks to edit. In fact, it usually takes me, when I sit down and I'm very focused. You mentioned I do a lot of travel. So one of the things I've done is gotten really good at getting my workflow portable and do most of my editing on airplanes. And when I'm really focused, disconnected from distraction and the internet and stuff, which tends to be easy on an airplane, I can knock out an entire wedding beginning to end in about 3.5 hours.
That's
So
fantastic. So
yeah.
do you think that, it's interesting to me because, people I feel like balk sometimes at high wedding prices. And I think they don't
Hmm.
realize the amount of editing and the amount of work that you have to put into. I think they look at it just as the wedding day, right? That's kind of how they gauge it.
Yeah.
And they think, wow, this is a lot of money for just one day's work, but it's not just one day's work.
No, of course not. You have client meetings leading up to it. You have emails back and forth. You have an engagement session, probably. That's a solid 4 hours of time. And you factor in travel and editing, maybe 8 hours once the final gallery is delivered for the engagement session. So you're talking easily like 30-ish or more hours per wedding of time invested. And, that's not even accounting for the scarcity of time that weddings occur. It would be a very different market if people got married consistently on a Monday afternoon. Like that just does not happen. There's a finite number of days that people get married. There's a certain window of time when the weather is consistently the best. And so that just drives up the cost of everything dramatically. And, it would be a very different story if, I could take on work on a Wednesday, but I can't. I mean, occasionally I get those weird weddings that are on a Wednesday, but that's very rare. And, there's good reason for that. People want their wedding on the weekend. And so people can, stay out late and party and all that. Like, it's just the way it goes.
Yeah.
So it is good money, but when you really start adding up all the hours, it's kind of just like anything else. And that's not even accounting for the difficulty of weddings. As a photographer, I find, I come from a press and news background, and I find weddings are, exponentially more difficult than that because it covers literally every genre of photography, all within the chaos and pressure of, family and this one-time event that you don't get to redo if you screw up. Like that's all of that just, again, drives up the cost and the value of your vendors and what's going into the whole equation. So yeah, it is frustrating. And I can totally relate when people are like, it's $5,000 for 8 hours. It's like, yeah, but I wish I could put 8 hours, parentheses, 30 to 40 plus, 10 years of experience that I have.
Right. So another thing too, if I'm not mistaken, a wedding photographer is one of, I don't know if it's in the top 5 or 10, but I'm pretty sure it's in the top 10 of the most stressful jobs in the US.
That's fascinating. I would love to see that list. I want to know what else is on
it
there.
is really close to being up. It's for sure in the top 10. It was mind blowing to me. But if you think about just exactly what you said, you have all the chaos of one day, and you get one shot at creating the pictures for that bride and groom and mom and every damn body. Mm-hmm. You get one shot. That's a lot of pressure.
Yep. It is. And I don't know, you have to have the right personality for it. I see a lot of people come and go. Seems like the average burnout is around the 3-year mark and then around the 7-year mark. Even people that are really, really good at weddings, or the stress doesn't bother them, still creatively, and just the sheer volume of photos that you work through, people get tired of it or just burn out and are unable to keep up. So you really do have to have like the perfect personality for it. And I'm very, very thankful that I do. I know I do. I wouldn't do anything else on this planet than exactly this as a profession. I feel very lucky for that. Of course, I have periods of like, I feel like I'm not doing as good at work as I did last wedding, blah, blah, blah. I still have periods of self-doubt and just feeling overworked. But at the end of the day, I'm always grateful and thankful that I found this as my job. You mentioned that, it is very, very stressful for certain people. And for me, it has never been about stress. Like actually that tends to be sort of a motivator for me in terms of pushing my creative limits. I'm the least creative person in the world unless I have something kind of pushing my back. My back has to be against the wall, which I often find, whether I want it or not to be that case, happens during a wedding. You just have to be good at improvising, and things can change, the flip of a coin. In terms of weather, in terms of suddenly a limo driver hasn't arrived, so we have to do all the photos here in the hotel lobby instead of where we may have planned at a different location. Like whatever it is, something goes wrong on a wedding day, and that's when I tend to do my absolute best work. So I'm very grateful for that compared to the work I did in photography before weddings, which was very structured, very, somebody is giving a 20-minute talk at a podium. I just sit there and photograph them speaking in front of a microphone. Very static, not a lot of room for creative expression.
So I'm glad you mentioned, the burnout in being creative. What do you do to, when you get to that point, where it's like, let's just say hypothetically, it's that burnout. Like, I feel like I just can't, I don't feel like I'm as creative as I was XYZ when. What do you do to reignite that fire?
Mm-hmm. One of the easiest things is simply get different equipment. Like literally, I majored in computer science in college, so I've always had a affinity toward the technical side of photography, and I'm always interested in the latest and greatest stuff. It's not just to see what is newly capable in technology, but literally to keep an interesting, new, fresh perspective, because I've got a new lens or a new sort of way of thinking about an image because this camera has a new feature that one didn't previously. Like that's the simplest thing to start with, is just refresh the equipment you use as often as you're able to. Obviously that gets expensive, but that's one approach. The other is kind of pushing yourself in terms of what is newer in the technique side of things, whether it's something like the Brennizer method, which is like a stitched panorama technique that creates a really interesting bokeh effect, or shooting through prisms, or shooting through like all sorts of interesting things that tend to surface on Kickstarter these days. There's always something kind of new that you can take it with. And then also just staying humble and realizing that no matter how many times you've done this, it's always new for the couple. And you can derive inspiration, creative inspiration and emotional inspiration from their energy and, where you are in the space at that moment that you're able to work with them. The light, for one, is always changing. Even venues that I've shot a dozen times, I've never been in the exact same spot at the exact same time of day where the light was exactly the same. Like that alone will unlock an entirely different perspective to the exact same space. Anyway, I could go on and on about different approaches to things, but at the end of the day, you have to remember it's the first time for the couple. No matter how many times you've done it as a photographer, you need to put your mind sort of in that space.
For sure.
And, that tends to enable a lot. Yeah.
So, okay. So you mentioned that one thing that you do that makes, fires your creative side is change equipment. From what I understand, and tell me all about, so companies send you their equipment to try. Am I correct on that?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yep.
Walk me who and what do they say? Tell me how that works, because that's really cool. Obviously, you must be pretty good if they're going to send you equipment, and you also rate it and give a review.
Yeah, I do a lot of reviews. So that's actually my personal policy has changed a bit over the years. I've had companies send me cameras, send me lenses, send me anything you can think of. And, I would gladly take it because it's free stuff and why not try it out. But ever since, I launched this thing called Patreon, which is essentially like a subscription paid feed that photographers can subscribe to get access to my reviews and opinions on things. Ever since launching that, I've had an ethics statement on there that I wrote that says I am not paid or given anything by any company, because I don't want that kind of influence weighing on the back of my head. Like, yeah, Sigma sent me this really great lens for free. I'm probably not going to say anything bad about it. Or even if I do point out bad things, I'm going to bookend it with really, really positive things. Like, I don't want that weird thing in the back of my head. Now, if a company sends me anything, I tell them, happy to review it. I'm going to give my honest opinion. If I hate it, I'm probably not going to say anything at all. And I'm going to insist that I give this away. So what you're basically giving me is a donation to somebody else, another photographer that's going to win this via a little contest or something that I might run. I never keep it for myself anymore. But the whole mechanism of like getting your visibility in front of companies like that really is a result of a lot of the educational and conference work that I do. Oftentimes companies are there, they have little sponsor booths and stuff, and you just get to know people in the industry the more you give talks at those events.
So Sam, do you realize, I'm sure you do, but I have to point this out, the fact that these companies send you the equipment and then you give it away. Do you realize what you're doing? And I know you don't do that, and I know you don't do it for this reason. I know you don't give the stuff away so it comes back, but do you realize that's what's happening, right? You give the equipment away and you're doing something so cool for somebody else. And I don't even know if you've thought about it this way, but the return for that in terms of, receiving whatever gifts in life, bigger weddings, better, whatever it might be, the universe, in which I believe in, the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, reciprocates when you do stuff like that. So it's so powerful, so powerful.
Yeah, I guess I've never sat down and like literally thought about it in words exactly like that. But I think in general, that makes sense. You're going to have people spreading hopefully positive message related to, your name if you do something, beneficial for somebody else. And hopefully it does work its way back to you some way. But
of course
it's difficult to think about because it's impossible to track. It's so hard to draw a direct line. And, I found that with my wedding clients, so many photographers are desperate to like the magical answer to getting more bookings and more inquiries and more weddings. And it's like, at the end of the day, it has to come from you start with friends and then friends of friends, and you usually start pretty cheap and affordable because you've never done this. But if you really do good work, exceptional work, and you're a fantastic person to work with on the actual wedding, not just the photos that you deliver, but like your personality, years down the line, they're friends of friends, and people speak up for you and remember you, and that finds its way back eventually. And that is by far and away my biggest source of inquiries and leads. It's just from previous clients one way or another. There is no like magical bullet for that kind of stuff. I hate to say it, but yeah.
Well, being a good person, and doing, it's funny because, I know that obviously you know my wife, I swear she'll come home and she'll say, yeah, XYZ happened. So-and-so forgot this. And so she does whatever she has to do to make sure that damn wedding is flawless, even if it's not her job. And I don't think I really do believe that most people probably would say, oh, well, if they forgot XYZ, well, that's just, sorry. You know what I mean? And so
absolutely,
they're not going to get a lot of recommendations they're handling their business that way.
Well, and photographers have a very unique position in that no other vendor is around the couple as much. Even the wedding planner is going to be physically in a different space most of the day. And so you as the photographer get a front row seat to managing all the oftentimes little flare-ups that occur, and you kind of have to problem solve your way through that. Or even if you don't have the answer and you're incapable of solving the actual issue, comforting your client and making them feel like it's going to be okay regardless. But oftentimes you're exactly right. There is something you can do as the photographer to help people. And I suppose videographers also have a similar position, but most videographers I work with tend to have even more of a hands-off approach to like getting in the way.
Sure.
Thankfully. But anyway, the photographer, again, I say it all the time, we're basically like part-time planners. There's no way to avoid that, even if you wanted to. Like, so much hinges around the photos getting done, and you are the witness to everything that occurs throughout the day. It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. It is crazy. It really is. I mean, it's mind-blowing sometimes. Okay, so now that we've kind of talked about some of the photography stuff, I want you to dive in, and I want to learn about who you are. How, where you came from, what got you into this? Who is Sam Hurd?
Great. Okay. I guess, my first real, quote unquote, real camera I got in high school, like most people. I've never ever been interested in film photography. And so my first camera that I used in any serious way was a digital camera made by Sony. And my best friend, who is still my best friend even today, also got one. He is a doctor now, an anesthesiologist, so he went a completely different route in life. But we would hang out, a couple times a week, taking photos. And that was most of what I did in high school, other than play music. If I'm being honest, though, music was really my passion for the longest time. That's what I really tried to make into a career, until I just kind of had to realize, no, that's just going to be my hobby in life. Music is my hobby. I'm making money from photography, so pursue that. But music is sort of what I put most of my focus on until after college. And I always took photos of things just for fun. Never really photographed people seriously at all. It was mostly like landscapes and kind of macro shots, the way I think probably a lot of people start with photography. My best friend and I, his name is Tucker, he went to a different university than I did. So to reconnect every summer, we would try and plan a 2 or 3 week backpacking trip, either in the US or over in Europe. Sort of the cliche, like American, going to Europe with their backpack, staying in hostels. We did that whole thing. We did that whole deal. But it was always with an emphasis and priority of getting good photos and visiting places for the photography, not just not really the people at all. We met fantastic people along the way. So I developed a bit of a portfolio from that, but nothing serious. And after college, I was scouring Craigslist for jobs. I was hoping to find something in the music industry. Wasn't really finding much. Found a listing for this place called the National Press Club, which is, I had no awareness of this place until I actually interviewed with them. 100-year-old organization right in downtown DC, a couple blocks from the White House. Huge space. And imagine sort of it's basically a country club, like a private country club for journalists, like actual, journalists, print, news, anchors, whatever. And so to keep the doors open, they have a couple restaurants, a couple bars, and then a bunch of like old rooms, like event spaces that they rent out for press conferences. What better place to have a press conference than where journalists are already hanging out anyway throughout the day. So anyway, I went and interviewed with them and was offered a job as their staff photographer. So I worked there for almost 7 years, full time, every single day. They would, when clients would come in to have an event there, they would have the option of, do you need a microphone? Check mark here. Yeah, you need a microphone. Do you need a speaker? Do you need a TV? Do you want a video camera? Do you want a photographer? And if they said yes, then that was me. I was the only photographer on staff. And like I mentioned earlier, it was super fun and exciting at first, but quickly became creatively stagnant. And I would have to like invent games to like challenge myself, because photographing like one or two people standing at a podium it's pretty boring. Topically, it was interesting to hear what people were speaking about. It was usually cutting edge, like news that you would see on the, on CNN later that day. But visually and photographically, it was not that great.
I can
so
only
that is how I like kind of lucked out getting into photography as a professional. And I learned mostly by observation. A lot of these events would be pretty high profile. So they would draw a lot of freelance photojournalists from all over DC. Most freelancers would just pop in at the beginning of an event like that, shoot for like 10, 15 minutes, get their shot, upload it to the wire, and then they're on to the next event somewhere else in the city. Me being a staff photographer, I would stay the entire event, but I could observe and learn from these other professionals, kind of, doing the run and gun type of thing.
So what kind of people are we talking about here? You said some pretty high profile people. Can you say like who?
Yeah, I mean, everyone came through the press club. Presidents, governors, all sorts of politicians, congressmen, senators, everybody. And then occasionally, celebrities, from the most famous to, the D-list. A lot of times celebrities would attach their name to an event or an organization that they believe in for whatever reason. And, that event would bring the celebrity to their press conference just to generate buzz and awareness. And again, I had complete access behind the scenes, not just at the event, but in like the, oftentimes if there was a really high profile person like George Clooney or somebody, they would have like a VIP reception ahead of time in like a smaller area. And I had free access to meet them and shoot that.
That's pretty cool.
The other photographers that would only get access to the event, once they're actually giving their talk at the podium. So it was an amazing opportunity. But once I started shooting weddings, I realized that's where my heart and passion is. So I was glad to eventually leave the press club. Not glad, but I'm glad to have found something more fulfilling, I should say.
Sure. So who was, I assume George Clooney is someone who you photographed, since you brought his name up.
I did, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So do you still photograph some of these people or no?
Occasionally, I'll still take those events on. They still funnel a lot of their photography through me, but most of them these days, and I don't know if that's the result of the news industry now or social media, where most celebrities can just kind of tweet if they want to raise awareness about some organization. Just not as many, really high-profile people come through the press club anymore. And
Sure.
So I shot there for about 6 or 7 years, and it's probably been about 6 or 7 years since I worked there full-time daily. So a lot has changed. But yeah, occasionally I'll still shoot events there as they pop up if it's somebody really interesting. But
that's kind of cool. Okay.
Yeah.
So before we go forward, so what about before you were 12? How was your childhood?
Pretty standard, I guess. My single family or single parent household, just my mom, and then I have a younger sibling. My mom raised us, and she was in the Navy until I was about 5. So my mom was in the Navy throughout the 80s, and so we traveled a lot, living on bases and such. And then we ended up in Colorado Springs for a couple years. That's where my mom was born, and most of our extended family are in that area, Colorado Springs. And then eventually we ended up in a place called Lynchburg, Virginia, Central Virginia. My mom's basically been retired since leaving the military. So she was always at home, raising us. And my mom always, I think, assumed I wasn't much for academics. I was not very good in school, not a stellar performer, test taker, whatever.
Sure.
I learned violin really early. I was passionate and gifted at that, again, with music and everything, but school was not for me. And so my mom always assumed, I think, I would go into the military. I was in the ROTC and all that kind of stuff from early on. And then I ended up getting into college and just going for computer science because I liked computers enough. But yeah, I mean, pretty straightforward. We were in Lynchburg from, I guess, when I was 7 years old all the way up until I left home for college. I moved out when I was 18 and never moved back. So I'm not the cliche millennial that, moved back home after school.
Right.
Most of my friends in college ended up looking in the DC, Northern Virginia area for work. And I was very fortunate. I graduated in 2008, like right when the economy was collapsing.
Gosh.
And I was so glad to get 2 job offers, one being at the press club. And the DC market in general was completely insulated from that entire catastrophe because it's so much federal government in the economy around here.
Right.
And so, yeah, I got a job and that's sort of how it's falling. But yeah, I still visit home often. My mom still lives in Lynchburg, and Virginia is a big part of my life still. And my sister's ended up over in Austin, Texas, and she works for a tech company. So.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, you were saying that you, where did you leave off? Lord, I'm sorry.
We were hitting everything.
Yeah, we are. So you said that, so after you left the job, yes, mm-hmm. Is that when you started weddings?
So yeah, it was a couple years overlap. I was always very aware of the financial situation of being self-employed and how terrifying that is. And so I stayed at the press club until I just absolutely physically couldn't take it. My last year working there, I was at the office shooting or editing at the press club from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, like any regular job, and also shooting 40 weddings a year. And only once I started to pick up in the travel for conferences and workshops and destination weddings that's when I decided, I need to leave the press club. And I was making way more money than I needed to survive, which was also a necessity because so many photographers shoot weekends on the wedding to start out. So they have like dual incomes essentially. And it's terrifying and problematic unless you have a very strict budget. You get used to all that extra money essentially laying around. And, so many people make the jump to full time, not realizing just how much it's going to hurt to lose that steady paycheck. And so I was very insistent on staying at the press club as long as I could until I was making almost double, what I needed just for my wedding work. And I was very fortunate with that.
So 40 weddings, you were doing 40 weddings a year when you made the leap. Yeah. Wow. So what does that look like today? Like, what do you do per year now?
I shoot fewer now, partially just because I do a lot of travel, and travel wears me out a lot more than it used to. And, I don't know, jet lag is part of it. Just physically being in a different space all the time than being from home is mentally exhausting. So I shoot about, I'd say I average about 30, 35 now, which is still a lot. I've shot as many as 55 in a year, but I have no plans to do that anymore. And I've been very, very fortunate to have started this Patreon thing I mentioned earlier. That has become a very meaningful, significant part of my revenue. And so that kind of work I can do from home, and it's all photography related, but it doesn't necessitate me being somewhere physically. It's just educational content that I make as a video, as an article, or whatever, and then post it on Patreon. So that has been a really great buffer financially as well.
Definitely dive into the Patreon thing a little more, and so that way the listeners can understand exactly what it is.
What is it? Yeah,
yeah,
it's hard to explain. It's become a lot more popular over the past couple of years, particularly in the U.S. But you can. It's a big company. I think they got about 200 employees. Patreon was started, I think, in 2012, maybe 2013.
Okay.
And the CEO and co-founder, Jack Conte, he's a musician himself, and his band was actually pretty well known, pretty successful in terms of just people liking their music and knowing who they are, but not financially that successful because they were always an indie band. He would spend, $40,000-$50,000 of a budget on to create a music video for a song, upload it to YouTube. It would get millions of plays, and they would see maybe $5,000 in ad revenue, which was incredibly problematic for him. And so he decided to start Patreon as a way to sort of crowd fund creative projects. Now, it isn't specifically for musicians. Anybody can post on there. Just imagine a feed like on Instagram or a Facebook feed or something like that. And you as the creator can post whatever you want. But say you have a post that's a particularly high value, like a really in-depth write-up about some photography technique that you want to explain to people, or a really awesome photo that did really well on Instagram, and a lot of people asked, like, how'd you do this? What were the circumstances? What lenses did you use? All that. Basically, you can flag any post you want in your Patreon feed to be accessible only to people that are actively subscribed to your feed. And you have complete control as the creator over how much you want to charge people. Basically, I have a $10 tier, and anybody actively subscribed to that $10 tier, it auto charges, at the first of every month. If they've paid at the beginning of the month, they get access to everything I post and flag in that tier. So I sometimes make public posts. Most of my posts are exclusive and only accessible to that $10 tier. And a lot of them have to do with, just equipment or technique type of write-ups or workflow stuff, how I manage family photos or how I manage posing, just really educational stuff that has a lot of depth to it. Anyway, but all sorts of people use Patreon for all kinds of reasons. It's actually really popular for podcasts. So if you don't use it yourself, Corey, you should check it out. Yeah, a lot of podcasts have big followings on Patreon. Okay. Yeah, a lot of them have, and what they'll do is like an early release of the episode to patrons that support them. Maybe a week early, they get access to the episode. Or I know some podcasts that will do, the regular episode and then like 15 minutes of follow-up that's exclusively only posted to Patreon. And so that just motivates people to want to support you and exist without having to resort to ads, which a lot of creators use. Sure. So anyway, yeah, Patreon, I've got over 1,000 people there now, and it's just fantastic.
That is fantastic. Okay, so are there any add-on charges, or it's just that flat $10 period, or are there
For me, it depends. So I've got two tiers, a $10 and a $19. They get access to the exact same content, but I limit the $10 tier so that basically the early supporters of me there from years ago get the better deal. So sometimes people leave that $10 tier and a spot opens up, but usually that is sold out because I just want to incentivize people to stay and get the better deal. And then, yeah, like I said, if you can't get into that tier, then it's the $19 tier, which hurts a little more. But, every month I post tons and tons of content.
Give me an idea. What do you say tons and tons of content? Like, what does that look like?
Like 2 days ago, I posted a 40-minute video kind of outlining exactly how best practices for managing family photos on the wedding day. Basically the order that I do family photos in with parents and all of that I find really efficient. The questionnaire that I send to clients, like the pre-wedding questionnaire that I send, some email templates that I send out if I get clients that send me huge shot lists, stuff like that, just stuff that actual wedding professionals hopefully really find valuable and appreciate, or at least give them some all photographers have their own workflow in place, but it's really important to expose yourself to the way other photographers do things, because you might be able to maybe not replace your entire approach, but like take little things that work for you and just overall make you better. So that's an example. 40-minute video takes a while for me to make and edit and put together. A lot of times, really in-depth equipment reviews for new lenses or new camera systems that come out. That takes many, many, many hours to put together. And then, of course, I have my own podcast. So we have episodes that usually we average about twice a month that we get a new episode out. And
Okay.
I only exclusively post those to Patreon. I don't post them publicly very often at all anymore. So yeah, those are some examples. It's whatever you want.
I'll definitely have to check that out. I was going to ask you, so one of the things that I noticed in your video is that everything is asymmetrical.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so my question is, I actually had to write this down. Do you think most photographers are somewhat OCD about that?
Yes, I think so.
Because I when I watched your video, like literally everything was perfect. My wife, same exact way. Like everything has to be, her thing is, she does lines, and I'm like, I never even noticed it. For years, I didn't notice it. And she was like, there's lines in everything that how do you not, I just don't have that eye, right? I don't have that.
Yeah.
I just didn't notice it. So.
Well, you develop it, and it's surprising to me. I've been shooting for years before I started doing any video work, and it's surprising to me how difficult it is to do, composition in video. It's so tricky because it's movement and it's motion, and it's just a whole new world of variables to consider, and it's so tedious because I do all the setup for my videos myself. Yeah. And it's really tough to film yourself in a way where the light is spot on, the audio is working well, like all these different variables. So many points of failure. It's crazy. And I often will record an entire video and not realize, like, oh crap, it stopped recording, or I forgot to hit record on the audio side and have to redo the entire thing.
Oh, that's a pain.
Yeah, it's a pain. It's brutal.
All right. So, So tell me about, you said, obviously, we hit on the travel part. What do you travel more for weddings, or are you more local? Meaning, when I say local, United States.
Yeah, I would say about half my weddings I travel for.
Okay.
By being pretty known in the educational side of wedding photography, I get a lot of clients that are wedding photographers themselves getting married, and I tend to travel for those. Those are the ones that tend to, have the budget for travel. Because that adds at least $700 to $1,000 normally if it's in the U.S. Sure. I'm lucky again in this region to have access to 3 different airports, so I can almost always get a direct flight wherever I need for a pretty reasonable cost. And so maybe half my weddings I travel for, and the other half are within a drivable distance. I would say also half my clients are just completely normal people that have no clue about anything in the wedding industry or what my experience and visibility is in the wedding industry. There's federal government workers that want creative wedding photos and found me on Google or through a friend or whatever. And then, like I said, the other half tend to be really passionate photographers or professional wedding photographers themselves. So
that actually makes a lot of sense. That's such that's so interesting, guys. It's got to be, the conversation is entirely different between you and someone who knows who you are, and then the federal person who has no idea. They just love your pictures. Yes. Such a different conversation.
It tends to be wedding photographers when they hire me. We'll maybe do a 10-minute call just to be like, hey, yeah, we want to hire you. We've been following your work for years. Like, we're done. And I'm like, great. And then I show up and they're just like, yeah. I'm like, do you want photos of your rings or anything? Like, you do you, whatever you want. I'm like, okay, this is perfect. But I get plenty of clients on, the other side of that need their hand held a little bit with timeline guidance and, just they have no idea about anything in the industry and they need help, or they need recommendations for other vendors. And, I can kind of help and lend my expertise through all different parts of the day. And, it tends to be an hour-long client meeting, and we do an engagement session to get them comfortable in front of the camera and all that kind of stuff. So I like it. I like having those 2 extremes in terms of clients that are super easy to work with and clients that are really difficult to work with. It kind of keeps me in my place.
For sure. Now, when you do client meetings, if it's let's just say it is a local, or it is local,
Okay.
whatever, within an hour.
Okay.
Do you do your client, your first meeting, do you do it via Zoom or do you go meet the client?
I used to insist and suggest right out of the gate, like only the option of meeting in person. And that worked really, really well. But I think in general, people just became much, much more comfortable with things like Zoom and Skype and FaceTime. That tends to be the primary way now. So I still suggest I meet everybody for coffee, but nobody takes me up on it. That's very rare. I like it because it's nice to get to know them, and it does take maybe 2 hours or 3 hours when you really add it all up to like get in the car, drive there, wait around, have the conversation, drive back. It's a significant time investment for somebody who may not book you. But I would say the booking rate was significantly higher when I would meet people in person. They would always book virtually. Now, I don't know. Maybe my booking rate is somewhere around 70% of people where I have a phone call or a Skype call with them. Many more people end up going in another direction just because they haven't put in that real time investment yet, but which is
Right.
fine.
Sure.
Yeah, I always try and have a face-to-face thing. I want to make sure that they are more importantly than just liking my photos, comfortable with me as a human and my personality being around them. Because, like I said, nobody is around you more after a photographer for 8 or 9 hours on your wedding day. So, uh, yeah, you want to have some visual sense of the person's mannerisms and yeah, all that kind of unspoken body language that comes with
Sure.
a Zoom call. Yeah.
So, I wonder how, you mentioned getting to know them and reading their body language and them getting to know you. I think that is
Mhm.
super important because, like you said, you're the person that's going to be spending the most time with them. Uh, you want, if it were me, I would want to know how you are as a person. If I'm going to spend 8 hours with you on the most stressful day of your life, um,
Yeah,
I want to know who I'm dealing with, right? I mean,
absolutely.
because I'm sure you've had brides that have things have gone somewhat south in their eyes, not necessarily with you in your pictures, but the day or whatever. Give me
Yes.
an example of maybe one of those times. Do not obviously say a name, but give me an example of a time that it was like it was almost a nightmare. And the reason I ask that is because I want any photographer that's listening to hear that you
Mhm.
go through these same things.
Absolutely, 100%. I get so many photographers that often say like, gosh, I wish I had clients that were as comfortable as yours in front of the camera and like could be posed really well and we're beautiful. And I'm like, I work through the exact same issues you do, client personality wise, problem. It's so funny to me how the smallest thing can suddenly set somebody off on their wedding day versus if it was a normal day, they would be like, oh, this is not a big deal at all. A lot of times though, I see brides in particular have some unexpected issue with the dress. Maybe there's like a crease in it where there wasn't during the fitting, or it doesn't quite fit as well as they thought it would once they start moving in it and walking around. It's shocking to me that there's no system in place for people when they try on a dress to actually go for a walk in it for like 10 minutes. Usually you're just standing there still in the dressing room. And
True.
that's a big problem because so many people I've seen like realize once they finally have the dress on and start walking down the hall, like, holy crap, I'm not going to be able to dance in this. Like, this is incredibly uncomfortable just because it's way too large or it's way too tight or whatever. They keep stepping on it. Like, it's so funny. Like funny, not necessarily haha, but just strange that there's no
Right.
mechanism. And so I see that often. People, get the dress on and they're just like, oh my gosh, like one of the buttons isn't buttoning right. Like this is a disaster. We need to take an hour to go get it like fixed. Blah blah blah. Anyway, yeah, and you just kind of have to tell people like this is par for the course. Like yeah, we're 20 minutes late. We're on time in wedding world. This is fine.
For sure.
And I'm very very quick to give up my selfish portrait time with the couple. I mean, if they want to move everything around and give me an hour of portraits, that's fine. But usually, if anything does go wrong, that eats into photo time first. That's the very first thing that gets cut, which kind of sucks. But I've gotten really good at just like, you know what? If all we have is 5 minutes, boom, we're gonna do these portraits in 5 minutes. I'm gonna just pedal to the metal. Uh, give them tons of direction so we can get through things quickly, and then we are on time again, hopefully. It's hard for me to like think of exact stories because I've done almost 400 weddings at this point, so my memories, I just let weddings kind of flow through me. I'm very present in the moment, and then afterward it just, I forget about all the stressful bad things. Like literally I can't think. If somebody else brought it up, of course I'd remember it, but I don't have like a short list of horror stories, thankfully. And honestly, I think that's also a result of the personalities I get. I occasionally get really stressful clients, like in their personality, very type A, really controlling, but the vast majority tend to be pretty great to work with for me. And I think that's just the result of my work being very creative. Like that's going to draw people in that want me to take control and like do my thing to create the creative shot. Like they don't know how to do that. They hired me specifically because they can't do that and don't know anybody else that can. So that I think brings with it personalities that are pretty relaxing. Oh, I will tell you a story from like 2 weeks ago. Okay. This was hilarious to me. I get there and the groom is freaking out. I'm like trying to get the elevator up to his apartment. He's like, I'll be down in just a few minutes. We're having a crisis. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, take your time. It was like a locked elevator, so I couldn't do anything but wait. 30 minutes later, he finally comes down and lets me in. And I'm like, hey, man, I've been sitting here for 30 minutes. I didn't say that, but I was just like, that was a long time. What's going on? Is there anything I can help with? And he's like, yeah, I just sent my groomsmen. He only had 2 groomsmen, so that's simple. Sent them to Staples. I was like, oh, what happened? You get like whiteout, or do you need whiteout for something? Like something gets stained? Like what's going on? He's like, my vows. I wanted to put my vows on index cards. I was like, okay. That's thoughtful. That's a really nice, clean way to read your vows instead of just a piece of paper or an iPhone. He's like, yeah, but they don't fit. I needed bigger index cards. Like, I am so upset. I'm like, you're freaking out about your vows being glued to index cards. And what was really funny about that was this was like 2 hours of him just being like, I'm so frazzled, I'm so stressed. But his wife like didn't even care about it. She read it off the paper that was printed from their printer. I'm just like, it's so strange to me that this one, he must have just had this vision of him for months now, like reading his vows off of well-glued index cards. And it's just like, why does that matter at all?
How does that or it's so matter? Simple. Why the hell didn't you think of that before the wedding day if it was that important?
That too.
I mean,
really.
Have
index cards, but they were like the wrong size, I guess. And at the end of the day, it's like, okay, but she still read hers off of a normal piece of paper. Like there was no reason to like insist. If anything, he should have just gone with the piece of paper so they would have matched. Like it was just the silliest thing. And he literally even wrote me a follow-up email like, hey, thank you so much for being really calming. And I know I was really stressed when you arrived for the first couple hours with the index cards. And I'm just like, what a strange thing to be really so frazzled. But weddings are like that. Weddings really, people have a moment in their head that they've thought of oftentimes for years that they expected to occur. And when that slips away, that's all they can think about, is like, what can I do to make that moment happen? That's an unfortunate perspective to have sometimes, because then you're not aware and mindful of what is actually happening, the stuff you can't and didn't anticipate happening, and like being appreciative of that unfolding. That's what you really want to embrace.
So you're so right, and once they think about that, whatever that negative thing is, it perpetuates into.
It can overwhelm you. Yeah.
Yes, 100%, and it's your wedding day. Like, is it really that? Look, if you spilled something all over your shirt that's red, okay, that might be a problem. That's that's a problem. But yeah. But index card, not so much. I don't know. Anyway, that's interesting.
It's almost always something like that. It's almost always like this small thing, like, a necklace that the bride was thinking about wearing that gets like a crink in it or whatever, and she can't wear it anymore. It's like, well, I don't know. Everybody has their own priority, and you need to be sensitive to somebody freaking out and just really have that calming presence so that they can get back to the point where, you're here with all your friends and family. Everybody made it safely. Everybody's here to support you physically by being here. Like, that is what matters, not,
that's
your bow tie not being tied perfectly.
So that's interesting that, one of the things that you said that I think is super, super important is that you know, you said that you stay present when you're at the wedding, and then once you leave, it's over for you. Meaning, like, you don't carry the wedding home with you, which I think I would be willing to bet a lot of people do. They do
Mhm.
carry the wedding home? They dissect it, they whatever. But you're able to just, you're there, you're in the moment, you do your thing, and then it's over. I think it's a
Absolutely.
great way to do it,
Yep.
dude.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of photographers try and sort of like literally befriend their clients and like actually treat them as if they're actual friends of theirs. And I used to try and have that too. And it's just not practical when you have, you know, if you shoot, let's say 30 weddings a year, that's 60 people that are your client. That's a heck of a lot of friends to keep up with.
Yeah.
I am their best friend when I'm working with them in the moment, via phone call, via engagement session on their wedding day. I'm 100% absolutely their best friend. And then once it's over, they're not. You know, I still take care of them professionally and customer service wise and all of that. But yeah, I do not hang on to anything, especially the stressful, problematic things that maybe went wrong. Like you just let it go and you move on to the next thing. And thankfully, I've gotten really good at my job. Like I know I'm never going to deliver a gallery that somebody is completely unhappy with. So there's a certain degree of confidence that comes with doing this. The longer you do it, the more, you know, the more you can be sure of your product, and that makes it easier, I think, to also let go of, oh, we didn't get the sunset light the way we planned. You know, some
Right.
photographers, if it's their first season, like they're dying to have the perfect light at every wedding because they need that in their work, to get the next wedding. But for me, I'm like, yeah, but we got awesome night shots. You know, I took them out night photos. We didn't get any at sunset, but it's all good. I got
Right.
awesome night photos, and they're gonna love that, I'm sure. So yeah.
So, okay. So, what do you think when you first started out? Were your clients the clients that you have now? Meaning, uh, the looks of them. Are they more picturesque now than they were then? And the reason I ask the question is because everybody starts out somewhere, right? And usually people start out shooting families or people that maybe they don't necessarily want to shoot, but they do
Sure.
it because they're trying to get into the industry. Well, so how do you go from shooting the people that you don't really want to shoot to shooting people that are amazing? Does that make sense?
Uh, all it has to do with price. You know, the more you charge, and I started like anybody else, $500 for a full wedding. You know, even though I had worked professionally at the press club for years, I was a professional photographer, but I had never photographed weddings. You charge what your experience allows for. After that first wedding, the second wedding that I had a friend reach out for, I charged a little bit more, 750, because I knew more about what was going to happen. And over time, I just ramped it up. Once you get clients that are spending 5,000, thousands of dollars for your wedding, they care more about the photos. Like that just comes with the territory. Generally, I mean, occasionally I get people where I'm still just a checkbox that they're listing, but it's all in your pricing. If you're stuck in that $2,000 to $3,000 zone, kind of the mid zone, where at least in my market, that's the middle of the market. You're getting people that often just are having you because you're supposed to have a photographer at your wedding, and maybe they just really don't care about pictures. But when you charge double that, photos are usually like their priority. Like that's the thing they care the most about. I would say the look and personalities of my clients has remained virtually unchanged. It's just the quality of the wedding overall, with maybe a nicer venue or a more professional planner with a better timeline, more buffer time, and plan Bs all in place and all that kind of stuff tends to make things a little bit easier. But yeah, the more you charge, the more people tend to care. But there is a turning point. You can also start charging way too much, where now you're in this other echelon of personalities and people that maybe are a lot more high maintenance. And I try and avoid that too.
So
You don't
how
want
do
to charge
you
too much either.
how do you decipher what that cutoff point is to where you get the people that you really, really, really want? I guess trial and error maybe, but
Trial and error.
yeah.
100%. Yep.
So
I've had weddings or years that I charge, $1,000 more than what I started now. That's the other thing. You have to remain it's so hard to accept sometimes, even as a successful, like established photographer, that like, you know what, I need to lower my prices. I'm just not booking enough weddings. I'm not booking the kinds of weddings that I want. Like I need to lower my prices, and that can be a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people, but I'm happy to, if I've had to do that before, and then I've had to raise prices back up again. It's just, you can't always be thinking about growth and making more money. You need to be thinking about, your actual, the quality of, what you're doing in your life, not just how much you're making. Hopefully that makes some sense.
Yeah, no, that does.
It has been a lot of trial and error. Mm-hmm.
So, you made a good point about, the people that spend double, they care more. It's almost a good example I like to give people is, if you buy a Rolex watch, you're going to take care of that Rolex watch 10 times better than if you bought a Timex watch.
Yes.
Because
absolutely,
the value is there. And so, yeah, that makes 100% sense. Totally makes sense.
It also translates into sales later on. People are more likely to print their photos when they've invested so much in them and share them with friends and family. Like it just, you really want to break out of the low budget clients as quickly as you can. And, I'm fine to occasionally shoot, I've shot weddings for free still for friends or people in need. Like I still do that occasionally, but you really want to ramp up to the mid to high, or, middle market to mid high part of your market as quickly as you're able. And,
sure.
Once you've got a season under your belt, like you should be there. But
yeah, no, I think I agree. But I also think that a lot of photographers, for whatever reason, the confidence level, they struggle. At least I think that a better portion struggle than not.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. That's just the nature of what we discussed earlier. It's one of the difficult jobs in the country, perhaps.
Right.
Most stressful and technically very, very difficult, and it's sort of the perfect intersection of art and artistic expression and technology, right? It's very, very technical oftentimes. And you want to hit that perfect intersection of both of those. And a lot of photographers only have confidence and skill set in one or the other, but like you really want to, if you can really balance the artistic side of photography with the technical side equally, the world just unlocks for you. But a lot of people are afraid of the technical aspects of photography. A lot of people are afraid of the emotional artistic expression side. So it's tough, but the longer you do it, the easier it gets, like anything else.
Yeah, for sure. So we talked about you testing out different brands. I don't know if you ever said what brands do you test, and how often do you do that?
So I shot Nikon, basically everything Nikon for 10 years. I used a lot of Sigma lenses as well, because Sigma makes lenses for all brands. And then I switched last year to Canon with their new mirrorless system. So I have been rotating through a ton of new equipment because Canon, being that it's a brand new mirrorless system that they launched, they've been launching a lot of new lenses to go with it. So I'm all in on Canon now. I still try a lot of Sony stuff here and there, and I'll buy stuff and try it and return it often. So I'm all over the place. I don't have brand loyalty in any one name. I'm all about whatever works the best for my brain, my workflow. That's what I use. So, and Apple, everything else for my actual computer,
sure,
phone and watch and all that stuff. Yeah.
Interesting.
But yeah, okay. Right now I'm sitting in Canon. I shoot the EOS R, 2 of them, and a couple of their newer lenses, which are obscenely expensive. They are getting crazy with their lens costs.
Really? So give me an idea. I don't know.
I have a lens that's a 28-70 f2.0, so it's a zoom lens. But it's really, really amazing in terms of its performance and sharpness and all that. It's $2,900 just for the lens.
Holy cow!
Yeah,
that
I've got
is
another
high.
one, which is I've got another lens from them. It's a 50 millimeter f1.2, and it was $2,400. So just the one lens. Like I think actually all of my lenses that I purchased have been more expensive than the new camera body. The body was only $2,200.
Really?
But yeah, strangely, it's really funny. But the glass and the lenses that they're putting out are super noticeably better than their previous generation from years ago. So there's justification to the price. It really hurts.
Yeah, no doubt. So there's a camera that I don't know if it's out yet or not, but the guy was telling me about a camera that has Lightroom
Yes.
installed.
Yeah, it's a Zeiss, I believe. It's the Zeiss. It's not out yet.
It's not out yet.
I think it's got a fixed lens, 35 millimeter full frame sensor. It's called the ZX1. And it was announced around this time last year, but no word on actual release date. I'm actually going to check out their website now and see if they've updated it. But yeah, I think it's just a check for availability and we'll email you. Nobody knows. But it is fascinating, and that is an exciting direction to take things. I would love to see my preset applied in the moment while I'm shooting.
Yeah, that's wild. So,
in fact, I think one of the biggest issues that photographers are facing now is shareability. You know, it takes so much effort to get the image off the camera, edited the way you want, and then into people's virtual world compared to a phone where you can just text it to somebody or airdrop it instantly. But that's what you need in a camera, is the ability to just like, yeah, you want this photo? Here, boom, airdrop, done. Like they really need to figure that out, or it's going to be a problem eventually. People want their stuff, you know, now.
Of course, absolutely. What else is I got? Okay, so and I'm not sure. I'm going to even check the time. What was that? Your girlfriend's a photographer.
Yeah, Nessa.
So, okay, yeah, Tessa, right? You said Nessa, right?
Yep.
So, does she shoot the same? Does she shoot weddings also? And you shoot together? How does that work?
We almost never shoot together.
Okay.
We met with independently established businesses, so we've never felt the need to combine them for any reason. We have shot together before, but only because it happened to work out for our schedules. We don't sell that as an option. She has a very different approach to everything she does compared to me. So it's great to have somebody who has a similar schedule and can, talk about things, with coming from a place of experience and knowledge. We can talk about all sorts of issues and equipment and all that kind of stuff, but we have different stories and different clients at the end of the day, which really keeps it interesting and fun.
No question.
Yeah.
So do you find that you guys, it's funny because, Autumn and I were talking last night and were they down and she said, well, I don't really want to talk about something to do with work. And I said, yeah, that's really all we talk about. Like, we don't really have much conversation outside of what we do on our day-to-day basis. Do you find that that's the same thing with you and Nessa?
Yeah, I would say that's probably accurate. Yeah, for sure. And we both work from home, so we're often physically close to each other, which is also important because with the amount of travel that I do, if she also had a day job, it would be, I would never see her. Just literally, I would never see her, and it would be a problem.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's really beneficial and important that we both work from home when neither of us are traveling. Yeah.
Yeah. So your next two shoots, are they local or are you traveling for those?
They're both in DC, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
I've got one down in DC tomorrow, and then the next one just after Christmas. That's actually more like middle of Maryland, but nothing. Nothing too far. I don't travel again until into January. I'll be in Puerto Rico, which is kind of cool. And I got weddings in Florida and Texas and the UK and all over the place. New York City. Yep.
Where is the most? We'll wrap up with this. But where is the most exciting place that you've been? Where was the place that you went and you're like, man, I am so lucky that I got to come here?
New Zealand, I would say.
Oh, I bet.
Up there. Yeah, that was absolutely beautiful. The groom found my work because I had been to New Zealand with my friend Tucker on one of our trips.
Okay.
And I photographed tons of landscape work and tagged it as like Lord of the Rings landscape or some keywords. That groom found my work and was like, oh man, I would love to come. I wish you could come shoot my wedding. And I was like, yeah, I'll do that. I'm totally happy to. And we looked at pricing and all that, and we made it happen. So that was, they paid my full rate plus travel. It was incredible.
That's fantastic. That is fantastic. So one, where can people find you? I definitely want you to tell us that.
So I usually send people 3 places, either just my website, samhurdphotography.com, and that's Hurd spelled Hurd, or Instagram, which is I am the Sam, because I am Sam is always taken on every site. So I added a the. I am the Sam. That's where I'm most active on like social media and such, is Instagram. And then, Patreon, just patreon.com/samhurd. Anybody who does any type of creative output, not just photography, not just podcasts, any output, illustrators, musicians, YouTubers should check out Patreon. It's literally changed my life, and I can't say enough good things about it.
That's incredible. Okay. And then the last thing I'll ask you is, to anybody that's listening, that's a photographer, what's something that you could tell them that would help them with their job? What would is something, just maybe a quick nugget of something that that you see early photographers, let's just say, struggle with? What's some advice that you could give them?
Figure out your workflow, your literal computer, like how you import, backup, and edit. So many people have just not properly configured. I mean, this is maybe not that interesting because it's sort of a technical thing, but it's so important and so easy to do if you just sit down and take the hour to set up Lightroom properly. It should not be slow. It should not take you 2 seconds to go from one image to the next and wait for it to load. And that is such a pain point that I see. I can't believe some of the slowness that photographers put up with. And when you're shooting weddings, you're talking thousands of images. You have to get your workflow, just sort it out. And not just for speed, but also for just practices in terms of backup and having redundant copies of all your work. I have 4 copies of every wedding that I shoot once I've imported and everything is properly, set up in Lightroom. 4 copies, including one in the cloud. There is zero excuse for lost wedding images, in my opinion, now, unless you're literally robbed as you're walking to your car from the wedding. Not much you can do about that, right? So that's the biggest thing. I see so many photographers struggle for years with just the simplest thing because they didn't take the hour to sit down and properly learn Lightroom. Yeah.
Oh, I would say that's huge. Yeah, that makes complete sense. I cannot imagine losing part of a wedding or losing the whole wedding. I mean, I'm sure you've heard horror stories.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, it's devastating. These are priceless photos, and or if eventually they would be priceless photos as people pass away and I don't know, time goes on. All weddings become priceless to somebody, and there's no excuse for losing them.
No.
So you got to sort that stuff out. Don't skimp on hard drives. Like storage, it's a little expensive, but it's not nearly as bad as it used to be. Like buy the external drives, get the second drive, never keep one copy of everything. Like,
what kind of hard drive would you suggest? What kind of external hard drive do you use?
My favorite thing is actually, so I've got a big, like multi-$1,000 thing that I use from a company called Promise. It's called the Pegasus. It's like a RAID array of 6 different drives. That one's pretty great. But I also really, really love these. These are made by Samsung. You can see it on the webcam. But for people listening, it's called the Samsung T5. And they're solid state drives, so no moving parts, SSD drive, USB and USB-C. A couple $100, you get a terabyte. I think they make them up to 2 terabytes now. I've got like 4 or 5 of these floating around that I just keep redundant copies on of everything I shoot. And solid state is always the way to go, in my opinion. No moving.
It's really small too, dude. Really small. Wow.
Yeah, it's like I just dropped it. Yeah, it's like credit card size. It's amazing. Yep.
And so now that you've dropped it, is there a chance that it could be messed up?
No, not at all. No. That's the thing. It's solid state, so there's no moving parts.
That's crazy. I did not know that they even made such a thing. So that's awesome. I think that's huge.
Yeah, it's basically, unless it cracked or like you really dropped it from a height, it's like a memory card for your computer. Like if you drop an SD card on the ground, it's not going to break unless it like drops in water or gets dirty or something like that. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Also, there's nothing important on this particular one.
Just to clear that up.
Yeah, just to make sure no wedding clients are freezing.
Right. All right. Well, Sam, I cannot thank you enough for spending, I don't even know what time we started, but either way, thank you. I really, really
Very welcome.
appreciate it, dude. And I know the listeners are really going to enjoy this because I've interviewed a bunch of people that, but nobody in this space. So
awesome. Good.
Super excited to publish this. It's probably going to be a few weeks because, like I said, I literally have so many people. So, but I'll let you know when it drops. And thank you so much. Have an awesome freaking day, dude. If you need anything from me ever, just reach out and let me know, and I'll be happy to help.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Should we do the clap real quick?
Yeah, knock it out.
Here we go.
There we go.
Awesome. So yeah, just look for those 3 things at the very end. And if you want to use the higher quality audio from my mic and you can figure that out, feel free. Otherwise, yeah, it's probably fine through my AirPods. Hopefully fine enough. But
yeah.
Cool, man.
All right, brother. Thank you
I'll
so
just
much.
send you a Dropbox link. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Have a great day.
You got it. You too. Bye.
Bye.